Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos, Kalim, prakim Chaf Aleph, Chaf Beis, and Chaf Gimel, beginning with Perek Chaf Aleph. We're going to learn in this chapter more about Chibur Kalim as we began already in the earlier chapters, but we're going to be applying it now to garments, to plumb lines, as we'll see, which is called a mishkoilis, and to beds. And most importantly, when it comes to Chibur Kalim, up until now, we were not differentiating in which direction. In other words, if something is called mechubar, then if everything was starred and the source of tumah touches the keli, or if it touches that which is attached to the keli, all of it acquires tumah. If something had contact with a keli that's tamei, whether it touched the keli proper, whether it touched that which is mechubar lekeli, then that will impart tumah. In this chapter, the Rambam is going to introduce that there will be times, b'negeya chibur kalim, that it will make a difference as to in which direction are we talking about, as we'll see when we learn this chapter. Perek Achad Asar has 12 halachos. Echad ve'esrim, the 21th chapter has 12 halachos, beginning with halacha aleph. So now let's continue to learn chibur kalim by begadim. Hachutim hayotzim min ha'arik. When you have strands that are still not woven into the garment, they're fibers that are going out of a woven garment. If you have a roll of fabric, strands that are going out of the beginning at the end, we have a picture here that's on the sides. It's all the same thing. They are called nimin. So the question is, beneged our topic of chibur kama sheyudan. How much of the strand will we say that it's still considered part of the beged? And what part of the strand is so far away from the beged that we don't say it's part of the beged? So here we go. And it's not a one answer for all. Shel sadin, for speaking about a sheet. Sudarin are head coverings. Sa'if is a scarf. Pilyan sholraif is a veil. 6 fingers. Shel chaluk, if we're speaking about a shirt, which is karua mitchilasi va'atsoifai, a shirt that's torn, funny, from across its entire length. That's exactly how our shirts are made. By us, it's the norm. In other words, it's torn across, but then when you get into it, it's easy to go into it. You don't have to put it over your head, but then you want to close it. How did they close it? Today we have buttons and loops. They had the holes, but they didn't have buttons. They had strands that they would wind it through the loop. That's the way the garment was made. We gather it by using its loops. Today we call that buttonholes, but they didn't have buttons. They had long strands. So shir chutav is etzed his voice, because that was the normal length of the strands, the length of 10 etzbois. Whenever we learn about an etzba, it's the finger breadth. Hasodois, a thick blanket. Haradid, a mantle. Hatalis, a big talis. There, if you have limen, shalosh etzbois. Now, so it's called mechuber, meaning any part of these nimen that are longer than the above shiurim. If the garment is tamei, but someone touched that part of the nimen beyond the length, then they're not tamei, even though that the beged has the highest level of tumah. So let's say a zav, or a zava, or a nida, or your ledis, a yoldis sat on the beged, so that beged has a tumah on the level of an av, that's metama oda midoy raisa. Yeah, I get it. If I touch the nimen within that length, I become tamei. If I touched it beyond that, I'm tar. Beautiful. All of that really began in Perek Yud Zayin, when the Rambam made it clear that even though yodois are part of the keli, you have one handle. If the handle is not necessary, that one handle can have 2 statuses. The part that's necessary is considered part, right there, of the keli, and it's tamei, and the other part of the same handle is completely tar. Same thing over here. Oh, of course, b'shar tumais. So that's in that direction. It's even if the beged is tummy on the highest level, and I touched that nimin beyond the length that's necessary, beyond the length that's considered mechubad, I remain tod. And also, the ein sarach loiman she'im naga tuma bi yased. If some source of tuma touched that additional part, that the beged proper is tahor. Gewalt halacha beis nimi akipah shol roish. So now let's go to a head covering or bahamasvem. Oh, here we go. Here the Rambam lived in Arabic countries. So the masve is some sort of mask. Shamanichin ho Aravi in Alpareim that the Arabs wear on their faces. And a belt that's made of goat's hair. And undergarments. Now I know the word simla can mean a garment. Many times the Torah uses the word simla, right, by Hashava Saveda. Here in the Rambam, the simla refers to the handkerchief, and a curtain that people put on their doors. So there isn't an amount where we say, the nimin is so long, it's not needed. Kol shahain doesn't only mean the smallest amount. Here it means no matter how big it is, as long as it is physically attached, it's called mechubar. And meaning, let's just apply, meaning if someone tamei touches the end of the strand, that whole simla becomes tamei. And if the simla is already tamei, whoever touches any part of the strand, no matter how far away it is from the proper beged, the person acquires tuma. The keli acquires tuma. Okay, we got it. Now, next topic is going to be mishkoilis. Mishkoilis is a plumb line. So people that build, and the Rambam is going to differentiate between different types of professions, different types of builders. So you have a string. At the end of the string, you connect it to some sort of metal. And if you want to see whether something is straight or not, they would use the plumb line. Today, we have all different types of patenting that are much simpler. You have the little ball with the ear in it, and you want to see if the ball of the ear is in the center. Anyway, they use plumb lines. So the question is here again, you would argue, you're kidding, it's a plumb line. No matter how long the cord is, it's part of the needed. It's not true. Because in certain professions, they would not need the cord to be longer than a certain amount. Which means that when they would use it, they wouldn't hold the edge of the cord. They would grab the cord from the necessary distance from the metal. Anything beyond that is not called connected. Let's read it inside. Mishkoilos shenitmes. The mishkoilos itself was tamei. Shnei asar tefach ben achut shalachibur lo. Shnei asar chut. Shnei asar tefach. I know it's a lot, but it's not more than that. Which means that even though the mishkoilos is tamei, if you were to touch on the strand, on the string that's beyond the 12 tefach, you remain taught. Mishkoilos of carpenters, there they needed even more. Shmoina asar tefach. Shal banoyin, builders, you have 50 amma. Point is, and not more. Here's a big thing. Even though the owner did not want to cut off that string, he wanted it to be, he's happy that it's longer. It's not used. Builders, the professionals would never use it if they want to go and see the straightness of something beyond 50 amma. They would do it twice. They would not use one time. And therefore, the plumb lines used by roofers, the shal sayadan of artists, here, there's no shear. No matter how long they are, all of that is sometimes used, and therefore it's called necessary. It's called mechubar tameim. Tameim means yaron that if this plumb line is already tamei, and this cord, I don't know, is 1,000 yards. Okay, you touch the end of the cord, you become tamei. Now let's go to chains. Very similar. Now let me just say like this: the weights that we are speaking about are weights that have a counterbalance, which means like this: if you're holding up the whole weight, or if it's hanging off the roof, first there is a chain. At some point, there is the crossbar. Out of the crossbar on each side, you see, that's a very limited picture. I'm not speaking about this chain. I'm happy, but not this chain. The chain is from the beginning. So again, you hang it from a chain. At some point, you have a crossbar. And then beyond the crossbar, you have the vavin. From each vav, you're going to hang a pan. We're speaking now about the top chain. Okay. Chut Maisnaim Shel Zehavim. The ones that are used by goldsmiths. That means that they have to be very precise. The Shel Peles, or even an ordinary balance scale. The Shel Shoikli Argaman Toiv, people that are wearing expensive purple cloth. Shoiches HaShoikel Boy, the commonality of these three is that they were not hung off anything. You, the professional, will act. It was a manual one. It was not a fixed. He would hold the top of the chain. The toilet was not the there. The chain on top of the crossbar was not needed to be more than 3 etzba'os. Now, if you had a chain that's longer, that's the whole point here. Even though this thing is tamei, I touched any part beyond shalosh etzba'os from the crossbar. I'm taught. Kana shalom v'chotem. Now, kana shalom v'chotem means the beam, the horizontal beam, and the strings that come out of it from which you hang the pan. Here we say kol shehein. There isn't an amount. Whatever is connected is considered connected. Now, going back to the first chain, the chain on top of the cross beam, on top of the horizontal cross beam. So the length of that chain. So people that are selling scraps of metal, the chayotze behen, they needed to have. See, on the picture that Kevin showed, there was no chain on top at all. But they used to have chains. Some of them had chains on top. There was a limit. Only shnei maser tvachim and not more. Next. The length of a chain of a scale used by merchants or shabalabatim, ol atefach. Now, knei hamoisnaim v'chotel shisha tvachim. Next. Chutz moisnaim that was used by tzamarim, by wool merchants, and the shol shoykles chuchis, people that are selling glass, tifchayim. So the chain on top, 2 tefach. More was not necessary, not mechuber halachically. Knei moisnaim v'chotel tisha tvachim. Hayoser al shuram elu. Then ena chibur. Physically it's connected. Halachically it's not connected. No moisnaim is tamei. I touch that part. I remain taught. Halacha 4. Now let's move on to beds. You have to understand that today we have a box spring, then they would have a frame, and they would weave back and forth, crisscrossing the frame. They used a rope. They would create boxes. In other words, it wasn't packed with rope, but there was some sort of box design. And on top of that, they would put straw or whatever they had as a mattress. So let's go. HaChevel shemisargen hamito is a very good picture. The chevel that was used to tie the supports of the beds. In other words, that which will be under the mattress. When do we say that the rope is part of the bed? So if the bed became tummy, the ropes became tummy the same. You have to have 3 boxes. If you have less than 3 boxes, now guys, remember something. That Bachlal Tuma can pass from one thing to the other. Like theoretically, if let's say if the bed itself became an av because a zav sat on the post of the bed. So then if the rope is not mechuber, it's still going to be tummy on the level of a rishon because an av can make a keli into a rishon. I get that. We're speaking about mechuber, meaning it has the same level of tumah. Now, you can have a very long rope that you still are using to weave. So any part of the rope that's within any of the knots is considered part of the bed. You still need some rope to be able to work with it. You always need at least 3 finger breadths tummy. So therefore they are called mechlal amit. However, in other words, even though you didn't yet snip it off, it's not needed anymore. Even if that part will be cut off, anything beyond 3 fingers, it's not going to affect the knot. So therefore, it's not called mechuber. Weiter. Now, halacha 7. Any cord that's extending out of the bed. Shehi tamei. If the bed is tamei, at soif arba tvachim, then at soif arba tvachim hanigeh batar, because it's completely not necessary. In other words, guys, in halacha vav we were speaking about the rope prior to you finish making all the boxes. Halacha zayin is that's very important. Okay, so they were making knots During that process, the rope could have been very long, anything that's outside the knot. You need a picture for that. Here we're speaking about you finished making the whole bed and you still have some of the cord. So it's interesting. Many people would hang the beds on the wall because their living spaces were not the way we had it today. During the day, they used that same room for the kitchen, for the dining room. So it's amazing. So if the rope was within 4 tfachim, that's not necessary. The moment you left more than 4 tfachim, you left 5 tfachim until 10 tfachim, then all of it is tamei. Not from the 5th tefach and on, all of it. Because if the reason why you left a rope protruding from the bed is in order for you to be able to hang the bed from it, then it's l'tzarchei amita. Then it's considered mechubar. Now, if you left more than 10 tfachim, then we separate it, like we're learning until now. The rope until 10 tfachim is part of the bed. The part of the rope that goes beyond 10 tfachim, because shuhu yosed al tzayda chamita. Amazing. Halach eches. Avnei shel odik shemakifin oisei elamita kedei lekabetz evarel. That's called the mizron, and we're going to learn about this mizron. So there's some sort of woven band that's tied around the bed to reinforce the bed. So in the picture that we have on the board, we don't have a mizron. All we see is the rope itself that's being woven through the board. I would assume, Kevan, that a mizran is something that was put on top of that. So it's a reinforcement. And some of it, if some of them, now obviously the band, whatever is leaning on the bed, of course, is part of the bed. We're speaking about part of the mizran that's going beyond. So here again we say, even up until 10 tefachim is mitzarchei amita. Yasar al kain ain't mitzarchei amita. Furthermore, if you have a mizran that got worn out, if you have at least 7 handbreadths of it, which is still good, that you can use it for something else, for a girdle of a donkey. Interestingly, and if not, the bed is already talking the highest level. And the mizran yoytzim imenu. And what did we learn above chevra until 10 tfachim? So harei ad asar tfachim. Rambam is applying the meaning of chibur. So then we say it's not something that touched something tummy. It's part of the tumah. Harei oava tumah kemita atzim v'hakol midros. Now we said that the part of the mizran that goes beyond 10 tfachim is not mechuber. I get that, but it doesn't mean it's scot-free. No, masaro l'chutz. Then hareyu kamagem midros. Amazing. In other words, it will become a rishon, and this is a klal to many things we learned above. Same concept. Let's say we're speaking mechuber in both directions. So if the zav, trampled on, sat on, leaned on the mizran, not on the bed, from 10 tfachim or closer to the bed, that means that the bed became a midras. Then the bed is a midras. Masar l'chutz, now tohiram. Wow. Now let me explain like this. You would say, whoa, masar l'chutz, let the mizran, that part, become an av, and let the bed become a rishon. We don't say that. I'll tell you why. Because by tumas midras, remember, mishkav u'moishav, a zav and a zava and a nida and a yoldes, they only impart midras if they sit or lay on something that was meant to be sat or laid upon. The mizran, it's an accessory. So if that part halachically is no longer an accessory to the bed, it was not meant to be sat upon. So the midras doesn't become, that mizran is nothing. So if the mizran is starred, the bed remains starred. That's great. La midras, it doesn't require tumas midras. Wow. So now we are beginning. Kate said, what do we mean? Mizran shul karach alamitam. And some of the mizran went under an oil amaze, or a sheretz touched some of it, or some mashkin tameim, which only imparts rabbinic tuma, fell on some of it. Here we say nitmeis hamitam. Wow, in that direction only. It's amazing. So this is the first time that we are saying that, hey, it's not, is it mechuber or not mechuber? It depends for what. So by the mizran and the mita, benegea tumas midras is where we differentiate the 10 tfachim beyond. V'negeya other sources of tuma, but in this direction. If the source of tuma touched any extended part of the mizran, everything acquires tuma on the same level. Halacha yud mita ha-temeya midras, and then you wrap the mizran around it. Another halacha. What happens when you wrap something that's secondary to something that's primary? Secondary becomes bottled to primary a lot easier than something that is primary that doesn't become bottled to the secondary. So even though when the med became tamei midras, the mizran was not on it, now that you wrap the mizran around it, you don't say that the mizran becomes tamei. On a level of a rishon, it's not maga midras. No, it's midras itself. Now, if you remove it, so the bed remains as it was, it's amazing. And the mizran loses that level of tuma, but it's not scot-free. The mizran now is tummy because it's a maga midras, which means a rishon. Same logic on another type of tuma. If the bed was to make tuma shiva, I'll give you an example because the bed was ba'oil mace. Then you removed it from the oil mace, or you removed the mace, and then you wrap the mizran around it. So of course the bed continues to be. So then the mizran, something that's secondary, something that's tafel. The mizran is tafel amit. It's an accessory. So it's bottled to the bed. So it becomes tamei in the level of shiva. If you unwind it, you don't say it was already tamei. Why would it lose its tuma? It will lose its tuma, but it's not going to be scot-free. Now it's maga tuma shiva. What is that? Tuma seref. He to make a shoisa, and the mizra is only tuma seref. Now, if the bed was only to make a tuma seref, and you wrap the mizran around it, here, this part is the same. Everything is tuma seref. But if you unwind it, guys, don't forget that a keli doesn't make a keli tamei, which a keli on the level of a rishon, right? A rishon is not matama a keli. So if the bed is tamei only on the level of a rishon, yeah, when it's connected to it, it's tuffled to it, it's bottled to it, it becomes a rishon. When you unwind it, then it's mamish scot-free. And we're going to have the same thing in other examples. Halacha yud aleph, mita shekarach ala mizran. And after you had this mizran accessory wrapped around it, then naga behem hameis, here it's different. And when I say bohem, either on the mizran or on the bed. The mizran within 10 tfachim is bed. We already learned that. So then hakol tamei tuma shiva. Furthermore, if now pershu, everything remains tuma shiva. Because the source of tuma in the case in halacha yud, first the bed became tamei. Then you wrap the mizran around it. Here, when the tuma happened, the event happened, they were all together. So unwinding them doesn't diminish the level of tuma. While it was wrapped, therefore everything is tamei tumas erev. And even if you unwind it right now, since the moment of contact happened when they were all wrapped together, tameim tumas erev. Halacha yud beis. How great is this? The final halacha. Keram. The kera, my friends, is some sort of bedpost, and the bedpost was temeya midras prior to it being part of the bed. Now it's not going to work. Now, guys, a bedpost is more than an accessory, because you can't. If you don't have the 4 bedposts, the bed is going to be lopsided. But anyways, the bedpost prior to it being connected was sat by a zav, or a zava, or neither yolos. And then you connected it to the bed. So hamita kula midras. Amazing. Notes the bed is tafel to a certain degree to the kera. If the mizran became tamei tumas midras, we learned before, and then you put the midras around the bed doesn't acquire the same level of the mizran. Of course not. Because the mizran is an accessory. A bedpost is not an accessory. It's needed. So the bed is bottled to it. Now, the same thing. If you now remove the bedpost, so the bedpost remains as it was, and the mita becomes tamei in the level of maga midras. And then and furthermore, while it's still connected, and it's undergoing the haza'ah, whether the ashes fell a little bit on the bed or even though it didn't touch the bedpost, doesn't matter. While it's connected, it's one thing. And as we learned, when we learned the dinim of paraduma, that the mayim that don't have to touch all the parts of the keli. It has to touch minimally any part of the keli. Now the and the mita now to me. So therefore, the mita b'chlal doesn't need to have the hazoya. The kera remains tummy. Hoisa kera to tumas erev, and then v'chidro l'mita, mamish like we had before. So while they are connected, hakol tummy tumas erev. But if perisha, so the kera itself remains tumas erev, and the mita is completely tohira. She'ein hatami tumas erev min ameis b'tamei lo yodem v'lekelim, because it's a blood like we learned. And v'chein hadin, by any tooth of a plow, shenitma b'meis, and then you connected that tooth to the plow itself, that this is like halacha yud beis and not like halacha yud, not like the mizran. It's not an accessory. The tooth, even though it's small, the tooth is part of the plow. Now, when you connect it to the plow, gavaldik. So the plow, the big knacker plow, is bottled to the little tooth, and while they are connected, it's tamei on the same level. Now let's move on to Perek Shnayim Ve'esrim. And let me say like this, guys, when we began Hilchos Kelim, which was not that long ago, it might feel that way, but how did the Rambam open up in Perek Aleph? The Rambam opened up Shiva Minei Kelim Heim. And it's amazing. How did the Rambam begin? The Rambam began, the first of the 7 is Begadim. Even though that in many other places in Torah, a Keli means a utensil, and a beged means a beged. No, in this context, Kalim also includes begadim. Now, obviously, the Rambam, the Mesudar, there's a reason why the Rambam did not go through this entire series of following the Seder of the Shiva Min and Kalim. The first one mentioned there was begadim. For whatever reason, the Rambam defined many other Kalim types. Now, Perek Chav we are beginning to define the begadim part. It's all about clothing. And it's, we already get the pattern. The first thing that we have to address is what's the minimum amount of woven garment or woven material for it to be called a beged, in order for it to be able to acquire tuma. This is whether the minimum amount woven, or the opposite, if you have a beged that's already tamei, how much of it in the other direction has to be worn out. Like how does it become a beged? How does it become not beged? Ois beged. Mitzias bittul b'mitzias. Same seder. We're going to have that, at least we're going to begin that in this chapter. Perek Shnayim Ve'esrim has 27 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Kama shir habeged lihistamei. Another thing that we learned, I know I didn't mention in the beginning, that it's not just if you know the vowels, the chirik versus the shvam will differentiate whether it acquires or imparts. They always put a suf, not always, it's not consistent. Because not everyone had a sefer with the nekudas. Not everyone has them. Most Sfarim are written without nekudas. When it's a saf, it makes it into a chirik, and then it's always about acquiring. You'll notice that. I mean, it took me a while to chap it. At least that's the novelty that I got through this time, going through these dinim. So how much of the cloth must be there in order for it to be able to acquire tumah? So let's remember, depends what tumah. If it's because you wanted to acquire tumas medras, right? Which we again, who imparts midras? Zov zavani then the yoldis, but it has to be on something that was meant to be sat upon. There, the minimum size has to be shloisha tvachim lemidras. Another thing, a good thing to remember, that whenever you have shloisha with a hey at the end, it's going to be tvachim. Whenever you see the word shaloish, I know that also will be true by amos. Nothing here needs to go into the amos. Shaloish is fingers. Because you don't have to read fingers, just to know. Shaloish, fingers. Shloisha, tfachim. It's not just that. It's, it's by all the other numbers, with a hey, without a hey. So if it's from Midras 3 by 3, and the shalosh is boys, al shalosh is boys, mechuvanos, im hamalal, you can even include, which is amazing, the rim, the what's in English, the hem, all of it included. Now, only the big date samero pishtim, which is when the Torah uses the word beged, the Torah is stam beged, that's the rule, right? Stam beged, Torah is samero pishtim. Avol begadim, that is made out of any other type of minem, which is today a tremendous amount of, this includes a lot. Ein mekabel tuma mikol tuma se'ela elam kein hoyeba shloisha tvachim al yasef. And remember that. And we're going to have to reconcile this sometimes in the later halachas, whether it is in this chapter or in the next chapter. But that's a very important rule. Shenema, as it says in Parsha Shemini, oy beged, and the word oy beged there is superfluous. And even though there is a rule that when the Torah uses the word beged, it means tzemer upishtim, and that's, we just went not that long ago, Tumas Saras. So we said that Tumas Saras is only on begodim of tzemer upishtim, not on anything else. But here, why are we including? Because this oyu beged is coming to include. Now, how do you see the 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim? You don't see it from this beged. This beged includes all other fibers. You're making it out of silk, you're making it out of cotton, you're making it out of polyester, you're making it out of nylon, and today there's another whole smorgasbord of other types of fibers. That would all of these shiyurim this is important, guys. In other words, you have a beged and you tore off a piece and you want to know how much of it must be here in this piece for it to be considered a beged. So we had this rule. Lemidras shloish al shloisha. Letuma shalish al shalish on semer opishtim. Aval ha'oidik beged b'fnei yatzmei. If you are weaving, now people are going to get tripped up later. Let me tell you not to get tripped up. The word oidik. There are other ways of making begadim, and that was needlework. We're not talking about that. If you are weaving a beged b'fnei yatzmai, there the halacha is kol shehu. No matter how little it is, it's susceptible to all the tumas, even though it's not even 3 by 3 fingers. Chutz mitumas midras she'ein mekabel loisam elaloi lemidras. And therefore, lemashal me'ingen le'ingen, when you use for king and sudar, a sudar means, a kerchief, a sudar means a beged. So it's in the comment that a Rav is going to take a gartel, and you have these little gartelach today that fit comfortably in your pocket that are very, very small. And let me tell you something, you can say it might be 3 by 3 when you wind it together, but it's certainly not 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim. And people use it for a kinyan. People say, how can the Rav make a kinyan sudan with a zagartel? Are we not learning that if it's made out of other materials, and I don't know what the gartelach are made out of, the answer is, this is the answer. That if you are oidig a beged, the fact that you lechatchila made it into such a small beged, you're making it that size is machshavit. It's called a beged. Halacha beis, now, very thick cloths like the lavodim, like felt, the hanamtim, hakashim, or very thick blankets, or in the other direction, very thin materials, which is normally only done then when they had this very expensive linen, the ones that they don't really cover you. They cover what they see-through garments. Then if you're speaking about a torn garment, not you are oidig it lachatchila, then all of them have to have 3 by 3 tvachim, bein lemidras, bein l'shartumais, and even, guys, that's the word, and even if it's temer or pishtim, because it would not work. If smaller than that, both very thick or very thin, it cannot function as a bag. Halachim, kol hakeliyos, all woven nets are makabel tuma, just like clothing are. Let's get into more details. This rule of a kliya, echad hakoylev chutin basam pif, whether you're making them into a thick cord, or you're weaving them together to make it into a gartel, into an avne, into a belt. Aside, with the exception of the net that are made by wool merchants, right, to hold the wool, those are pure. I just want you to know, why is it pure? You think about it, there has to be a point where the holes in between the nets are so humongous. It's not a baguette for these dinim and taka. So they, to gather wool, they allowed huge holes. Other than that, good. So all of these kliyos amar kabbalas tumah. Hakela shebeis kibul even sheba arug oyoid. So you were speaking about akela. Akela is what David HaMelech used to take care of the oig, the groisa oig over there, right? So we want to know. So I guess we take that apart. The part where the stone rests, and that's normally either arug, that's where they put the shteindel, or it was made out of leather. That in itself is mekabel tuma. And it's interesting. It's like midin beged, not midin keli. It's interesting how it's classified. Nifsag base etzva shalom. Now there was a place that you needed to put your finger. The place where you would put the ropes right around that little pouch. So that's where you would pull it back to project the stone. That is tohidon. Because without that part, it doesn't function anymore. Nifsag base hapekia shalom bilvad.
Kevin has a picture of this better.
Okay, Kevin has a picture of this. If the handle of the slingshot is slit, then it's still usable. Then you have to see the keli, and therefore it's still susceptible to becoming tummy. I'm just pointing out again, why is it in the pedic of begodim? Maybe it should be in the pedic of kalim. It's called a beged for whatever reason. Like different type of fishing nets. Again, the answer is it's because I'm sorry. The answer is it's because we're speaking about kalim that are made out of tzemer upishten. Even though the pouch was made sometimes out of leather. Even the pouch was made, it's a beged, meaning it's made out of fibers. That's why we're learning everything that's made out of fibers. So fishing nets, all of them are susceptible to becoming tamei. So if you have a fishing net with a closely woven pocket, that's the chedem. The whole thing is susceptible to tumah because of its pocket. It mamish like a beged, even though it's a net, there comes a certain point where the lechalech are very little. It's like it's connected. That's already considered tahor. But if you make it out of the pocket, here also it's mustama similar to those begodim, those pishtin begodim of the Mitzrayim. They are tameim because that's how they were begodim over there. Also cholok minham mashmeres. If you make a cloak, if you make a shirt from a cloth, from a material that was used for a filter of liquids, if you still have 3 by 3 tvachim, mekabel tumam. It's amazing. Shloi shah. Okay? And not less. And lochayda dani, that means even if it's made out of tzemer or pishtim, but since this was originally made to be used as a filter of liquids, here everything needs to have the larger share. Lochayda, halacha 5. Mashmera shalyan shabals. Again, they had cloth filters. It was used for wine. Now it's worn out. Guys, if you can still use it for wine, it's good. But if not, mistama, since it became red, no one would use it for begadim. It was before the cholok from another mishmeres, a shirt made out of a cloth to be a filter for water. Yeah, it was not stained. Even though the bracha that Yaakov gave Yehuda was that he's going to wear garments, kibas bayayin susay, of a seder. But that was just a bracha that he should have. The Rebbe explains the beautiful mimer. But even the pshat that you're going to have so much abundance that you'll even wash your garments with it. But practically, if you wash a garment that's used to sift wine, will not be made into a garment. Right? So they would have beautiful cloth covers for sfarim. So if there are designs that are made on it, that's it. Ein mekablan tuma. Because once there is a design on it, and it's clear, and guys, remember we learned before that a keli that's made for a keli, remember that? It's something made for a keli. It's not misham adam, it's misham kelim. Like by kliates, we learned it won't even be, if it's pshuta kliates, wouldn't even be tamim midrabanan. But if there's no design on it, then mistamois b'sha'ar tumois. Because since they don't have design, then you should know that means that the owner did not necessarily set it aside for scrolls. Now, I want to add a detail. I know that you put up a picture of a Sefer Torah. I'm saying l'chayda. If something was used or even set aside for Sefer Torah, I think it's going to be different because Ma'alam HaKodesh Shalom Meridin. I think the Svarim that he's talking about were Pasha that Svarim. Svarim were not the way today. We're so lucky. Everything is relatively so inexpensive. The cheapest thing in the world is a Sefer. Lasts forever.
What about the cover for your Chayim?
That's what I'm saying. In other words,
is that a cover for a cover? I mean, a cover for a kli or whatever?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's certainly not kaddish on the level that it cannot be used for anything else.
Is that called something with a design though or not?
That's a good question. I think mine is, and also it's cut in the size of a sefer. There, it was. I think we need picture. In other words, it was more primitive. It's a dual functional. dual functional. Chutz mitumas midras, in other words, even if it doesn't have a design, guys, even if it doesn't have a design, it will never acquire tumas midras. And if you remember, what was the klal? Remember that Rambam gave an example that if you have a bucket, that was a good, that you used to store chitim, and a zov sat on it, even though it's maga midras, it didn't become tame midras. How did the Rambam define it? I remember this from the Gemara, because if someone is sitting on a barrel that's made to store grain, if I need now to put grain in or to take grain out, I'll win. I'll say, listen, I need it now. I don't care if you sit on it. It's not something that was made for midras. Such a garment that could be used to cover svarim is so nice that if someone is sitting on it and I want to now use it to cover a sefer, I'll win. Not that you got it first. It was not made for you to sit upon. Like we learned in the Mishkan of Moshe. So in other words, it's not going to ever acquire tumas midras. Halacha 7. Keses hasabalim. So you have the schleppers. I know not the derogatory meaning of a schlepper. It was a profession to be a porter. Now, you don't want to get all of your body worn out. So they would have these beams that they would put across their shoulders. But for it not to hurt your skin, they would have cushions. You understand? So that's the keses. Keses of the sabolim, shemanichem al kisveim, because of the moit. The moit is the man-made yoke, the stecken, upon which they would put all of the, whatever they're schlepping. So that nistam, it acquires tumas midras because that is made also to be sat upon. That's the way it was. It wasn't only made to put on your shoulders. A cloth used to filter wine. In contrast, even though sometimes you might sit on it, again, it was dafka used. That was the primary function. If you had in mind to use a cloth for designs, you know why? I'll tell you the biggest reason. Because one of the common threads is that anything that shaloi nigman amalachton is not susceptible to becoming tonic. So if this cloth was made alta and is to have something painted on it, prior to that, it's not a ready product. Take that away over here. But if you changed your mind, then mekabel tuma. Now I'm going to add a word again, l'chayda. I might be wrong. L'chayda, you have to have a maisa, I think, because if you remember, we learned that eina machshava mevatel machshava. Okay. Anyways, if you're making covers to hang over your walls or your pillars, ein mekablois tuma for another klal. What was the other klal? That anything that's not letashmish adam, that's called something that's made for another keli, is never going to be mekabel tum. If you have a cloak that's made like a veil, people that when you're sitting, people are sitting around in sittings that you shouldn't be. In other words, you have people are drinking, and the entertainer would get dressed in unmodest clothing. That's the type of cholik that we're talking about. Ena makabel tuma, because batla daitoi of the late son. It's something that's not commonly used. So if you're living in Mitzrayim or in some places in the world that are becoming like Mitzrayim, and we learned before, and they're wearing, that's the kahalach yelech, that people are walking around over there in Brazil in the carnival with bigodim that you can't call them bigodim if that's the way people dress. If you have a certain see-through clothing that is only worn by the late son, by the entertainer, that's not called batul daita. See, we're living in a culture now that, look at the crazy world, that these meshugaim over here, that they dress naked, basically, everyone copies them. That's a problem. But it used to be that if that was your profession, you got dressed very immodestly. You're entertaining beer drinkers, mamish. But that's not called a beg. Well, because it was see-through. No, no koda. Halacha yud. A woman's head kerchief that was placed over a sefer. I love this. In other words, since the ikir is to put it on your head, so your change of use doesn't make it enough. As a din of a beggar. I'll tell you more. I'll tell you, better. Take it back, because we learned before any head kerchief people would use as a pillow. once you designate it to put it on the sefer, I think sin, he writes, right, now it has a kedusha of the sefer. Because when you designate something that does not allow you to use it for a midrash is disrespectful. That's the word. Beautiful. Halacha Yudalef. Rambam la'am. Yeah, it's needed. Ha'oise is belanes when you're making a bandage, whether you're making it from leather, when you're making it from material, afal pi sheyesh bo shiur. You know, that's really the shloisha al shloisha, they remain kohanim because you're right. No, he writes on the bottom that something that has on it these shmirachzen. Yeah, it's not just the bandage that Kevin is showing over here, but they put some sort of ointment on it, so it becomes mo'us. Yes, because and therefore, you know, it's if you can clean the shmirachs off, you know what? Leather you can clean, right? You buy a car with kindlech, you get leather seats. I know it costs more money, but at least when you clean it for Pesach, you look like you have a normal car. You know, it's materials, they get a lot dirtier. So it has to do whether they are cleanable or not. Not whether they're dirty now. So Misha Yarik boys, Shalash's boys, Ashalash's boys, guys, that's Semer Upishtim. Chol Hakelim Hanerogim Bamachat. Mamachat means not on a loom, like a kiss that on palya pockets or leggings. That's a very big rule, Danny. In other words, even though we began this Pedic, now this Pedic began with something that was a beged, and I'm gonna make it clear, and it was worn out or it was torn off. So how much of it do you need? Here we're speaking about you're making a beged. We also learned that if you're oireg a beged on a loom, on a machine today, we learned that even the smallest amount is a beged. Here it's bamachat. That's the word. That's the answer. If you're making it bamachat, that's not the normal way they would make begadim. Then we don't say. Then it's not enough that it's 3 by 3. Kol hakelim hanasam al gab bamachat, like a metzuda, like a trap. Even she'asa bebeis kibul. Melachton, as long as the receptacle is made, what's the word of the beis kibul? That the purpose for which you're making the beged is here. You can use it as of now. This word of Gemar Melacha continues by a beged. Halacha Yudalit. So a young woman have these fancy tichalach. So I guess you know the word mipia means. Just like your mouth is the outside of your face, mipia means there's 2 ways of weaving these sevachos. Right? You know, you can use today a nice yarmulke, but let's stick with the Rambam. You can begin it from the outside in. If you know how to weave, you can begin with that's the pia, or you can begin it from the in out. So if you began it, let's say milmailo lamato, then you got to finish the whole thing. Of course, you know why? Because you can't use it. But if you began from the inside out, you get it? Also, and it goes to Ma'achig. And it doesn't matter which way you're making it. It's seemingly, I know why he doesn't say a yarmulke. See, it's meduik. I would say l'chayda that a yarmulke, even though I heard that my malamed and chayder hat me gesucht, the bigger the yarmulke, the bigger the Yerushalayim. There's a truth to that. They were very uncomfortable with the little, they would call it the Coca-Cola bottle caps that some people wore as a yarmulke, little ones. But l'chayda, you can say certain yarmulke, yeah, you want to have a number 7, whatever number you're using. So number 4, you can use it. I think that's the word. By these women, to cover your hair. Now, just to know, you'll see no difference.
Is there a difference? Which way seems like the same?
Yeah, but I'm trying to say that. I think that's this whole part. That's what I'm saying. My whole drush of my yarmulke, Danny. That by a yarmulke, you wouldn't say that. I think by a yarmulke, if you would begin from the mouth, then you would have to finish it. If you would begin it from the karkiyasa, I think if it would be smaller, even though you want to make it into a number 7, if it's a number 2, it's not a big Yerushalayim yarmulke, but it functions.
Someone said maybe in the Sparta countries they didn't wear yarmulkes.
I'm not talking like I'm just my muscle. I'm saying over here, these svachos were worn outdoors, and we'll see there's a big difference indoors versus outdoors. Outdoors, they've covered all of the hair. However, ushevisa, one second, all of the ornaments, forehead covering is considered the keli for itself. All of the strands that are connected to these head coverings are considered connected They're ornamental. And both ways, both directions, both litame, that's going out. If it's tame, it's going to impart. And there you have the chidik and the soft that we added today. Ulehi stame, and to acquire. Now, svacha shenikra, if the head covering is torn, then to hoira. That's the key. And if it's mekabel roiv sa'ara roish, then I would say they would use it inside their house. Don't kill me over here. I'll say that. I know sneos is everything, but there is a difference in halacha just to know whether you are indoors, al pi halacha, or whether you're outdoors. In other words, outdoors you have to cover all your hair. Inside the house, they would cover the roiv of the sa'aris. They would, as the Gemara says over there in Ksubas and the whole sugya of right das Yehudas, das Moshe. Okay, halacha tazay choluk shel beged, oy shel leved, oy shel niyor. You're making a cloak. Imagine they would make it, these outer simple garments, even if it's made out of paper. I love it. When you make the opening through which you stick your head, because we're not talking about a talis, a mitzvah. How did they wear it? They had these simple four-corner garments. It's like our talis cotton. All they did was, you have a beged, they would make a circle in the middle. Now it's a beged. No hands, no feet, but at least now you can stick your head through it. Now, how much of it has to be worn out? So let's define that further. Let's say you wanted to have a talis for a New York winter where it's freezing. You would want it to go all the way down over your legs. Guys, I appreciate this. It's not that it's pants, but you want it to be long. Doesn't matter if it got worn out, but if it covers the roiv of the chest, you're still going to wear it. Ruba milamata. If the bottom portion comprises the larger part of the cloak, I think ruba milamata means if the bottom portion comprises the larger part of the cloak, and the top and the bottom got worn out, I think I don't care if the bottom got worn out, but if that is roif, then even though you still have a little, I think that's what it means. It goes by the top as long as roif was not worn out. I think that's what he's adding. Not it goes by the top. Okay. The im nikram base piv. Now, obviously, guys, I know some people, I don't know why by us, you buy a Lubavitch or Talis cotton, they don't have that slit on the top. But many, if the slit was made L'chatchila, that's not the problem. The problem is that however you made it, if that's torn, then it becomes torn. Halacha Yudzayin. If you make a belt, mitzidoy shel beged, from the collar of the garment or from the side of a sheet, because what happens in all of the edges of garments, they would make a hem, so it's like tight. So imagine you cut off just that, stronger. You have to make a border. Now, by the way, you already have one border. You already think about it. The beged had a border. I cut off the outermost part. So one side has a border. Make one border, and now you have two borders. If you cut out a strip from the middle, then you have to make two borders. Very good, simple. As well. Because if not for that, it's going to fall apart easily. If the edges of a belt were worn out, but still the emtsiyase kayemes, even though we just learned in halacha yud zayin, if you want to make, so to say, a new beged, you have to make it with borders on two sides. Unlike if you already had a beged, now it's getting worn out. I'm going to state it's still a tame, because once it was chal the toiras beged, if you can still use it, you can still use it. It might get worn out. It's going to fall apart quicker. Okay, let's wait. Then it's going to be when you can't use it, then it's going to lose toiras beged. Halacha you test him. Safa shepershem in a beged, and now not that you cut it out, it's different. I think when you cut it out, it's more designated. It fell off. The skin alachker by a smasnav, the kabela stuma, because it's like an avnate. Even without a maisa in it, it was a beged. You designated it to continue to be a beged. And you know why he writes sholani? This remember in the Gemara. Because Ashirim, they bought new begadim, like today. This is very important, because if we're living in a society that people do not wear worn clothing, people don't make patches. When was the last time, when I was a kid in Brazil, everything patched was common. It has to do. I don't know how to apply it b'poel mamash, but it batla datli. Then it was different. If aniyim, they wore worn garments. Any beggar that has the majority of the edges intact, there isn't even 3 by 3 fingers. You have the edges. People would make a beggar for the wedding and wear it. They say until the tachrich they would wear it. That's the way it worked. You bought a hat once and you wore it your whole life. But then the people don't make a living. To give them a living, we have a whole minute. You buy a beggar every Monday and Thursday. It's different. Then it's still like Abel Tuma. Im love and Mekabalas Tuma. The Chain Shard, big day aniyim. And big day aniyim, that's the key over here. That's the takeaway from this halacha. It means if you're an American or you're living in most parts of the world, that Baruch Hashem, even though everyone needs parnas and everyone should have parnas, amen, more is better in a good way. But it changes these halachas. Only by aniyim do we consider a worn-out garment to be a worn-out garment. If you're living in a society that once it gets to that point, people throw it away, it loses the din of a garment. Halacha chafal, makliyos, patches. She'ein by shloish al shloisha, ein mekabelas tuma. Now again, hello, didn't we learn that samero pishtim only shaloish? L'chayra, it's difficult to understand it. The easy way out is that the Rambam is not speaking about samero pishtim. I learned that in the Rambam La'am. I just think it's a doichik, but he had no other solution. If you have a better solution, then please share it. But if you designated it, that patch, but a shekol pach is mishalish al shalish, ain't a mekabel tuma, afal pisha echinoi. Now, hello, didn't we learn that if you made a beged, and again, the answer is, Danny, that what we learned in the beginning of the chapter is like the little gartel that I used for the king in Sudan. That was made for a beged. Here we're speaking about a patch. It's batlodaita. A difference between a beged, a difference between a
niga. A cloth for cleaning your glasses.
It's much more than 3 by 3. I'll give you a good guy. Just what you have in the picture I have in my pocket. Not that it helps me. The problem is my eyes, not my glasses. But this is much bigger. This is, look at this. What are you talking about? I know it's not 3 tvachim. So this is an example. This is a good example of a beged. Think about it. This is a beged. It's not samero pishtim. It's cut out. It was not made this size. Yeah, you had these big, I know that you had these big materials and they made it into patches. And the Rambam is saying over here, it fits a patch. It was made for this size, cut out. It has 3 by 3 fingers.
So that's irrespective of Samar Mishnah?
I was asking, that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that Rambam wrote in the beginning of this chapter that when you're oidig a beged on a loom, even if it's smaller than shalish al shalish, it has a din of a beged. I think that's by a beged. This is a patch. Yeah, it has to be. Right. Halacha base. It was made to be a plug. You know what? Until now, how many of us in the bathtub, you're giving a bath to your kinderlach? What do you use for a plug? Their t-shirt. I don't know. You use a garment for a plug. Because the plastic plug, someone misplaced, that's where your lost socks are. It's all together. There's something over there. Or you want to, whenever your hand is going into your pots, so what do you use not to get burnt? So you would use pieces of materials. Or so now the din is like this. Once you are less than 3 by 3 tfachim, it's very easy for it to lose toira scale. It can have a toira scale. Throwing it into the garbage. No, it's prior to that. It's 3 by 3 fingers, 3 shalosh, and you designated it. It's makabel tuma. Throw it into the garbage. It's not. If you're hanging on a hook, you put it behind the door. Throwing in the garbage. If you hang it up, even though you put it behind the door, it doesn't mean you're not going to use it. Anything that's less than shloisha will not become Tomei B'tumas Midras. Guys, this is good. Halacha chav gimel. Shloish al shloisha. Now, halacha chav beis. when something is less than shloisha thrown in the garbage, if it has shloisha, and yes, it's thrown in the garbage. So what do we say? Think about you in your life. Do you, when you see something in the garbage, do you always leave it there, or there are certain times, oops, that should not have been thrown out? So, your body, what's that body? It's so good, it's so durable, so not worn out. What's that body? That you can hold a fourth of a cob of coarse salt, and the beged is not worn out to the point that it's not going to get torn. Then, even though you threw it in the garbage, no, it's still stam and midras. But if it was not thrown away stam in the velterai, even though that's it, once it's in the garbage, it loses that ability. If it's not thrown away, we don't need for it to pass this test. In both cases, it is a midras. Interesting. And now it got torn, but not torn all the way from one edge to the other. So if you actually are still using it to place it on your chair, why would you touch the kisei? Because it's torn to the point that the moment there's movement on it, the torn part opens up. So when you sit now, you're not going to be sitting on all of it. Well, look at this way of going about it. Even though it's torn. Halacha chafei. Sholosh al sholosh. Right? The minimum of oroy. Shenimcha mimenu afilu chut echad. Because if you have the minimum size patch, and even one strand is worn out, you got yourself a problem. Right? It's the minimum minus mashu. Or even something the least of problematic. If you remember, like we said, sholish al sholish is not my samacha, right? It's oroy. How do you define weaving? I'll tell you how you define weaving. One string goes over, right? The width one goes over, under, over, under, over, under. Sometimes when you're weaving, instead of going over one, under one, which is what you want consistently, you went over two or under two. That's called shnei chutim masim. That means that the maisa ariga is not perfect. You are beginning with a beged that has the minimum size. If something is off, hareisu tohira. Halacha chavav sholish al sholish shlicha ba'ashpa tohira. But you know what? As we learned above, you are taking it out of the ashpa mikabel stuma. So listen to this. And you're removing it from the ashpa mitamasa. Dear, it has value. Even if it's put in the garbage, because it's chashuva. There's a word that they say in Brazil that from Americanish garbage, you can have a good life. And it is very important. In other words, if you're living in a society that people are throwing into the garbage, imagine things that are gilded, which is the meaning over here. Then throwing it in the garbage cannot be mavatalit. There has to be a certain point just because you meshugan about tashkis, Okay, halacha of zayin, the final halacha, sholish al sholish, that was placed into a ball of fabric. That means you have a ball of fabric, and and you're covering that ball. It became part of the ball. It only had 3 by 3. Or if you balled it within itself. In all of these cases, since you began, now how did you put it onto the ball, guys? I want you to know, you sewed it, it's connected. So if you begin, like we had on Halacha Chafei, if you are beginning with the minimum amount, once you lose any part of it, automatically, it's good, but if you have shloisha and you put it bakadr with other materials, wow. And if you made it into a kadr b'fnei atzmai, then ein mustama b'midras, because hatfar, how do you make it into a ball? Again, you sewed it a little bit. That diminishes it from the minimum amount. Now, if you had exactly shloisha al shloisha like we had before, like in the beginning of Chav Zayin, if you lose any part of it, it's not shloisha al shloisha. So it's not going to become tummy b'midras, but it still can acquire tuma if it's semer or pishtin, because it still has the shalosh al shalosh. Beautiful. And now, Chavre Pedic Chav Gimel. First of all, we're going to continue to learn Tumas Begadim, But we're going to begin by learning mapots, which will be amazing. Mapots is some sort of mat. It's made out of cords. It's not used as a beggar. It's used as a mat. Now think about it. Something that's a mat. On one hand, it acquires tumas midras. It's made to be trampled on. People don't wear it when it's made out of coarse material. So it cannot be makabel tumas begodim. But you know what? There's a klal. Anything that can acquire tumas midras, which is a tumah hamura, cannot be scot-free if there was maga. It's going to go to other rules. These mapotsin were made out of materials that grew from the ground. So you know what we're going to say? We're going to say that what's the din of a clay eitz? You have to know the din of I know it's a pshute clay eitz, but it's going to acquire the tumah, at least midrabanan, as we'll see, of pshute clay eitz. It doesn't lose its clay eitz status as well, since it can be mikabel tumas midras. We're going to learn about the sock. We're going to learn about garments made out of leather that we did not learn about in chapter 22. And the big takeaway of chapter 23 will be like this, that when it comes to shiyurim of begodim made out of different materials, as we will see, there are different shiyurim. Like we learned samaro pishtim, shalosh al shalosh, shloisha al shloisha. You know what we're going to learn today? We're going to learn 4x4 tvachim, 5x5 tvachim. We're going to learn different shiyurim. Then after the Rambam establishes a different shiyurim, the next kasha will be, what happens if there's a beged made out of two different materials? So do they combine? And we're going to see they combine in one direction, that's the way I'll word it now, and not in the other direction, as the Rambam will explain. We will also learn rules of what were to happen if you attach to a beged another beged. Again, this is something that we also have chibur kelim, as we're going to bring it over here into the Gadim halacha. Perek Shloisha ve'esrim has 11 halachas. Don't think 11 is quick. 11 is just as long as the prior chapter, beginning with halacha al. So let's begin with the mapots. Now, the key here will be, it's a mat, it's a machatzeles that is made from cords, from reeds, from grasses. In other words, it's made from material that grew from the ground. That will be important. So first of all, because the Torah mentions, this is not a fiber. It's not called a beggar. However, because when the Torah writes, we learned this in Hilchas Mishkav Moshe, Kol HaMishkav, it adds even more fibers than what's used for a beggar. And so that's number one. Now, on number two, so you can't say that, okay, only midras. No, because it doesn't lose its status of a pshute clay eitz. So this is amazing. And by the way, you can have a clay eitz if it's made limidras like a chair. We also find that. So it acquires, that's midra. It acquires tuma. Midras, and a chair is also, I know that it's a pshute clay eitz, but that's what we learned. Pshute clay eitz, shalish midos. This falls into the category. Chair is made la'adam of kalim. That was the key. And midivrei soifrim, it's makabel tuma. The zeklal gadol, shekol hamistame b'midras. You can't say that it cannot acquire any other tuma. Mistame b'shar tumas. You're not making up new systems. So you're saying it doesn't lose its status of a pshute clay eitz. And therefore, whenever Itaka only medivrei seifrim, but so what? But it can become tamei medivrei seifrim at times. Halacha beis kvar b'yanu shabeged. We learned in the previous chapter misname, even if it is only shalish al shalish, kamoisha be'arnu b'shara tumais u'b'shloisha tvacham u'shloisha tvacham lamidras. Now, halacha gimel hasak. If you have a garment that's made out of goat's hair, really, it's not only goat's hair that Rambam already spoke out. Not that long ago, camel's hair, that Rambam gave examples of fibers that are coarse. People would not normally make a tightly fitted beged out of it, but they would make these sacks. And not the shalosh al shlosh. If you're making clothing out of leather, that's common, then it has to be 5x5 tvachim. A mat, a mapot, has a minimum size, which is 6x6. Whether it is lemidras, as we began this chapter, whether it is l'shar hatumais, as a pshute clay eitz, as we have in the beginning of this chapter. Now, remember that. So what do we have? So we have shalosh by shalosh, shloish al shloisha, arba al arba. And then we had chamish al chamisha by leather, 6 by 6 by mapods.
Where the size comes from, the size comes from its usefulness.
Its usefulness, and even though sometimes people make use of smaller, batla daita, correct. And opachas min hashurim ha'elu tohirim mikulam. All of these numbers of shiurim, bekera echad mehem shenikra b'lei kavana, that if you began with a larger garment and a part of it got torn off, you want to know whether it still retains its status of a beged, you have to have these minimum shiurim. But if you had a larger garment that had a toidas beged, and you purposefully cut off even a smaller amount, and even if it's only tefach al tefach lemoisha, or shloisha tvacham al shloisha lemishkav, areze mestama b'midras. And by the way, lahoid, this is a big insight that Rambam probably was expecting us to chop it before, but here the Rambam is differentiating between moishav and midras. And the difference here will be in the shear. That even though we learned before shloisha al shloisha, it's going to be used lemidras, unlike lemoishav. Interesting. For moishav, we only need a tefach by tefach. Oya shloisha was from a beged or from a sack or from a oida from a mapot. They all have different shiurim. If you cut something off to add it to your moishav or to add it to your bed, then even though oil, we said, has to have 5 by 5. No, it's not going to go with those shiurim anymore. If you set aside, you had a large fabric roll, and you cut off a piece, your hands are getting burned. You need something to grab onto the pot. I'm sorry, the example here is that you're harvesting figs. You don't want your fingers to get poked. Then that's already the minimum. Here we go. Now chibur begadim, and the work will be what is it made out of? Is the normal minimum share 3 by 3, 4 by 4, 5 by 5, 6 by 6. So let's say 2 tfachim is min habeged. And the other, umenasak, you have a tefach. So let's go, if we say by beged, Danny, let's go back to our 3 by 3 shloisha. You have the shloisha al shloisha. But you know what? One of the shloisha is minasak. Now, what is the minimum shear by a sak? Guys, what did we learn? Arba by arba. Mitzad chelik asak, you don't even have the minimum amount. And let's use it to anything. Shloisha minasak. So you have arba'a. Now by sak, arba'a by arba'a is enough. Shkoyach. But oil needs to have chamisha by chamisha. Arba'a min oil, and you have the fifth, but the fifth, now the mapats needs 6 by 6. In all of these cases, you don't make a chibur lechumra. You make a chibur lechula. What will be the other direction? It's not about to right. The other direction would be, guys, if you have chamisha tvachim in mapots. Now, from mapots, what did we need, Danny? 6 by 6. It's not about right. So, and now I'm using one now. Mitzad the oil, I only need 5 by 5. Here, which is good, because if oil only 5 by 5 makes it chashuv, so oil lemapots avade, and you have the total 6 by 6 now. That in that direction, you're machaber, you're mitzdaref. Arba min oil ve'echad min asak, shloisha min asak ve'echad min habeged hu gabaldi. Harei tome midros zaklal. Here are the words. Kol shehishlim shurim b'chamur mimenu. We count it, and we need that, but we include it. Tome, if you include min akal means something that you need more of it to become tome b'tumas midros. Then it doesn't add up to the lower number. Then Tahir, halacha 5, below yein nafaf, you have a sifter or a siva kavara. And
is there any measurement, by the way, where it would add up? Let's say you're using the word kal beged.
No, it wouldn't add up because you wouldn't need it. Well, adding up will means that if I already have shloisha by shloisha of the beged, and now I added 1 tefach of oil, the oil doesn't have arba. But here, since the beged is mekabel tumas midras, now that it's mechubar, that's chiburi kelim. I think the Rambam is going to speak about this soon, the fetish, but then it's something else. Then, I mean, we learned the klalim before. Once a beged is already tamei, anything that's considered adjacent to it, part of it, at least while it's connected, will become tamei like it. Halacha 5. That I get, guys. You know, yikatzitze means you have to cut off the edges. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because you have to do a maisa. It was enough. You want to change its function, do a maisa begufa, and then we'll have a din of a mapot. Halachavav. Choluk shel katan, the cloak of a child, tame b'midras, until it has the shear of shleisha shvachim, shleisha tzvachim. And what's the big chiddush? You know, when you have a one day old, you have a little infant baby, you would argue, ooh, it's a beged sholing. I don't care. I don't care if it's a beged sholing. Never will midras go on anything that's less than 3x3. Now that I'm a Gavaldica thing, think about your beged. When you have a beged, whoever's in the world, the shmata business, the beged that you look is at least folded in half. Think about your shirt, your pants. It was double the width. It was folded over. So the question now will be, when we're looking to get this minimum shloisha al shloisha, do we say that if it's 1 tefach and a half, Danny, and 1 tefach and a half, it came from 3x3? We don't say that. When you have a beged, the nimdat kaful kibriyase, that's a kula. It means you need to have 3x3 as it is folded over. And you can't say, I know that this beged for the minor is a tefach and a half, but if I were to undo the strings, it came from a, we don't do that. It has to be 3x3 the way it is. We don't always say that. Let's see. The elu nimdadim, but the following ones, nimdadim kfulim. We do say if it measures 1.5, it came from double. There is double inner. Where do we do that? Garments that are worn over the feet, the garments that are worn over the shins, garments that are worn over the head. Interesting. Pants. Akishal punda. Akishal punda means the pockets, undergarments with pockets. Over there, maybe because the beggar is not chashuv enough. There we are machman. We say that since this beggar is comprised of 3x3, even though now it's sewn in a way that it's doubled over or more, we look at the material part of it per se. And if it has the shloisha al shloisha, it will acquire tumas midas. Matlis shetalo al asafam, a patch that's sewn over the edge of a garment. Im pshuta, if it's extended, no, that is pshuta. Im kfula, if you first doubled over the patch and then you sewed it up, then like we had in the beginning of Allah Chavav, then this kfula lekulam. And it became Tamil Midras. Then he just goes to your question that befedish. You know what happens? That we had this in today's Perek Chaf Aleph. Even if you attached it later, tafel is batal to the primary. If that is already midras, if I keep on adding to it, it's not maga midras. It's midras proper. Kula midras. Now, nital chut echad mitilasai. If you remove the strand from the beginning of the original garment, Danny, you had an original garment. It was 3x3. You added to it. What did the Rambam say? The addition, I'll cup over here. The addition becomes midras. What happens if you took some of the garment apart, but you still have 3x3? So the Rambam says, from where did you take it apart? If you removed even only a little bit of the original 3x3, even though now you added 20 feet, I don't care. Tor min midras. Because everything else is taka midras because it's tuffle to the original. You need the original. But on the other hand, it's not tor miklum. Everything now will be considered tami maga midras. Interesting. Like we mentioned, so let's go. First, you had 3x3, shloisha. Then, and it became tummy. Then you remove the chut. What happens if you remove a chut? Chevra, tohar, lost its tumah. and then you don't even say Magamedras. You know why you don't say Magamedras? Because when you lost the 3x3, there's nothing to touch. Nothing is tummy. And now you are mashlam the beged. Call a beged tummy Magamedras. I made a mistake. The remaining of the beged has a din of Magamedras, like we learned above. And now that you bring it back to the minimum shear, it returns. Tumas Midras returns. And what did we learn above? It can acquire Tuma and Venitma b'meis. Same thing. So this now is the minimum amount, and then you add it on the beged. Step number one is all of the addition is tuffle to the ikr. It's part of the ikr. It's mechuber lebegadim. Is habeged koli to meis. If you removed even only one strand from the original 3 etzbois by 3 etzbois, tar mitmei meis, avol tame maga meis. Same thing. Now, not al chut echad mitchilasai. If first you remove the strand, so it lost the tumas midras. It lost the tumas meis. And then you extended the beged hakol tahar. Now the Rambam says, "V'lami hakol tahar." Tell you why. The difference between here and there is very good. Is because before we were learning about something that was shloisha al shloisha, which means even though it lost tumas midras, it was still a beged. Here, that's the thing. Once you began, here we're learning about the smallest amount possible. Once it loses shalish al shalish, it's not a beged for anything. So beautiful. Even though you reconstituted it. Now, here we go. Because it has 3x3 fingers or more. A patch, a matlas, right? That already became Tameh Midras. And so what do we say? You are attaching it to a basket. You are attaching it to another keli. You are attaching it to a hide. Nasa hakoy levishayin latuma maga midras. Danny, why don't we say what we said before? It's simple, right? Just give you the words. Because before you made the beged bigger. If I have a beged and I'm making it bigger, the added part is a hemshech of the beged. The added is tafel to the beged. If I'm taking a patch and I'm connecting it to already a basket, which one is the ikr? Guys, the basket is the ikr. The patch now is tafel to the basket. You can't say that the basket is midras. What you could say is, no, the patch acquired tuma. I get it. The basket is a kli. Okay, so it's a maga midras. So the basket becomes a rishain. Hifrish es a matlis. And now if you took it, if you separate it from the patch, it remains that way. Because it touched the midras, nothing changed. The matlis becomes tohira. This is amazing. The matlis began already tummy. You connected it to the basket. What did we say? It became part of the basket. If it became part of the basket, now what did it become? No more basket. Shekiven shetala'a. Beautiful. So it became tafel to the basket. Now that you removed it, batla. Wow. Now, one thing is clear, Danny. If a Zav now is going to sit on this matlis, he'll make a Tommy Midras again. Not Batla, it's nothing. Any patch that has Shloisha, al Shloisha, is Mistama Tumas Midras. The Chiddush here is that even though it was already Tommy, first you attach it to the basket, it's bottled to the basket. It imparts Tumah to the basket. If you remove it, it's completely tar from Midras. We don't say like bite the basket. If I connect the patch to a beged, then we don't consider this a bottle to the beged. Fakert, everything is a beged. No, it's beged is a shidduch. They merge into one. Even sock and material merge into one. Basket doesn't. A kupa doesn't. You get it? Material. And by the way, even oil is also like a material. Even though you need to have a different shayurim. The hamatlis here it remains. It was never bottle. It fits. It goes both ways. The hamatlis avatum kishaisa, because it never was sharei ene betela ala arig. It was betela on the kupa. It was not betela b'haraya. While it was connected, all of the other part became tama like it. Tofar hamatlis ala beged. If you attach this, we're thinking about a patch that has tumas midras. I don't know what that picture means. And if you connect it to you connected it, you hung it, not properly. If you connected it, we just learned. But if you only hung it, if it's miruach hachas and shnei ruchais, because they gam. Let me tell you what I mean, guys. If you have, Danny, you have. Let's go. Mizrach ma'ariv here, sofan darim. If I have a patch and one side is connected to one garment, one to the other, that's called a connection. Gam is the base upside down L, the gamma Greek letter, right? Chaf Yavanis. So what do we have is if I have one beged connected, Mizrach and one Darim, Mizrach Tzafim. That's not a good connection. Eino chibur, and therefore they don't become an ab. Now, yeah, maga midras, the patch, no doubt. But if tfara mishtei ruchos, that's what needed. So not, in other words, I don't need a patch to be tfara me arba ruchos. As long as it's connecting two other pieces of material from opposite sides, either mizrach ma'ariv or tzafim darim, then chibur. And since beged merges with beged, all of it becomes an ab. Halacha 9. Let's move weiter. Shloisha al shloisham. Shenitma b'midras. Right, as we are learning, and now it got cut into two. Tarim and amidras. The ain b'kroim elutuma klal. What don't we say, Danny? We don't say it's maga midras. Why didn't you say it's maga midras? I'll tell you why. Because when you ripped it, it no longer had midras. How can it be maga midras? As we learned above in all these chapters, you have a klei cheres, you break it into three parts. None of them are tamei. And from this beged, you cut out shalosh boys and shalosh boys. Now, in the beged, Danny, you have the shloish al shloisha that remain. Midras cannot be al shalosh. But when you disconnected it, there was still other shloish al shloisha. So this shalosh al shalosh is tamei maga midras. Oisa kero torben midras. Because in the beginning of Allah test, Danny, the shloish, you rip it into half. There was no maga midras. Halacha yud sodom midras, a cloak, right, or a sheet that acquired tumas midras, and then you changed its function, you made it into a pareiches, a midras. However, you have to have a right meiser. Here we go. Not when you intended to use it for a curtain. When you connected loops to it, a maisa begufa it's called. You showed with your maisa that you're changing its function. And what's the word? People don't sit on a curtain. So how can it be Tamei Tumas Midras? Halacha Yud Aleph, to find halacha in this chapter, tal is that it already is a midras, and you take it to the mikvah, you took it into the water. And I know we have no option, guys. We got to take it. We're gonna have to take our begadim into the water, but don't forget that water will ruin a garment. So here we go. Now, normally you have to wait until night, right, for Tzum and Kacha. The Koid and Sharav Shimsha, you decided to rip it apart. Now, ripping it apart is another way for you to get rid of the Tum. Kiven Shenikra Ruba. Shuv Eina Chibur. Amazing. Even though what remains of the beged is more than shloisha al shloisha, enough to retain. Here we say tahara kula. It's a big chiddush. It's a big leniency. One second. Didn't we learn the whole time that as long as you have shloisha al shloisha, here it's different. Here, you for sure will take the whole thing apart. You're taking the whole thing apart. You have enough to make a little suda. Shaloi nikra hareyu kore you soifay lekraya kulay. The medvar mamurim betfulas yoim. Shekiven shaloi chasel al adbila. Like you think about it, Danny. Why did this guy? Why would he do both? Taking something into the water ruins it. However, if you're planning to designate the whole thing into little patches, You don't care if it went into the water. So the act that you took it into the mikvah shows that you're not chas on it. So you will end up cutting the whole thing. And that's why everything is taught. If you didn't take it into the mikvah and your solution is, okay, it's tamei, I want to get rid of the tumah, I'm going to cut it into patches. Whatever is made into a patch, fine. It loses tumas midras. It still is tamei maga midras. But that which is still intact,